Today I'd like to share with you a really good way in which one can remove a woven section off the warp on your loom and then very simply tie the warp back on so that you can continue weaving on the rest of the warp. This doesn't necessarily involve a whole lot of retensioning or retying or anything else like that. As long as your warp tension is perfect, and I say perfect, which is underlined in capital letters to begin with, this method will work brilliantly and save you a lot of time and a lot of warp space. I'm Glynis from Weave at Brooklands, and I hope that you'll find this information really, really useful. So as many of you will know, we're kind of deep into the study of bound weave and crookbracht on the Patreon page. And both of these weave structures are characterized by being incredibly dense when they're woving, most especially the bound weave. And what this does, if I can just zoom in there, is it creates a big buildup of cloth on your cloth roller, to the extent where I've woven a single cushion cover on here and I have sufficient warp now for another 2. And I'm thinking to myself that I'm actually not sure that the space between the breast beam and the buildup of cloth on the roller is going to be sufficient to accommodate another cushion cover going forward. So I'm going to show you a really, really very clever way whereby I'm going to cut this cushion cover off and I'm going to continue weaving with the rest of them. Here's the end of my first project and the header, which is going to form part of the turned under seam, and I finished it with that little line of PVA glue. Then I've left a space. The size of this space depends on how you're going to finish your first part of your project. If I were going to do a twisted fringe or something like that, I would obviously have left a far bigger space here to give me enough warp with which to work for the twisted fringe. But since this is just a turned under seam, I didn't worry about that. Now I've woven just a small section, just enough to stabilize everything. And again, at the bottom here, I've run a line of glue and it's nice and secure. You can see I can actually get my fingers in there and I can really push down on the warp, and that little bit is not going to move anywhere. Now comes the trick. I'm going to simply open a shed. It doesn't matter which shed you open, and I'm going to insert a stick which is the correct width for my weaving and close the shed. Now I can take my scissors and I can cut. And just straight down the middle, I'm going to cut these off. Don't worry that it's curling up like that. It's because the warp, when you use this technique, is under tremendous tension. So there we go. This part of the weaving can come right off. Isn't that pretty? Oh, I do like that. And I'm going to take it off the front stick or the apron rod, which is the correct term, at the same time. Now you're going to take 3 pieces of something that is very strong. And it needs to be really, really strong. The first time I tried doing this, I just used normal cotton to do the tie-ons, and it broke within seconds. So what I've got here is, I think this is a 3 millimeter, but it's a blind cord, so it's nylon and it's very, very strong indeed, and 2 elastic bands. And to start off with, we're going to take our elastic bands and just loop them around the ends of your apron rod. And then again, just form a loop over there and pull your second stick through the loop. This is purely and simply to hold everything in place so that we've got 2 hands with which we can tie the 2 sticks together. So just the second elastic band, you make a loop with that, okay, just like that, and pull your stick through. These loose threads that you're seeing on the selvage, that's just a floating selvage which I've taken the weight off. And you need to do that before you start the process, because if you don't take the weights off your floating selvage, you're going to find that it's going to want to pull back. So now I take my first piece of blind cord. I'm just going to loop it over the apron rod or the front stick, whatever you want to call it, and take it through more or less in the center of the warp. Just get it around there and pull it up really tight, as tight as you can, and tie it in place. When you're doing this, what you have to look out for is that the distance between this stick and this stick must remain the same, because if you find that one end is pulled up tighter than the other end, you will find that your tension is going to be off. So be very careful about keeping that distance uniform. If you're in any doubt at all as to whether or not the space between this side of the stick and that side of the stick is uniform, use a tape measure and measure. It really is worth doing the adjustment at this stage. There we are. Now you can simply put your weights back on your selvage threads and pull up the tension, and you're ready to begin weaving again. Just get your cross sticks, make sure your cross sticks are pushed to the back, otherwise you don't get a shed, as you know. And there you are. I have a perfect shed, and I'm ready to continue with my next piece. So, as I said, 3 key things to remember here. First of all, don't use this method if you were in any doubt as to the uniformity of your original tension. That's the first one. The second thing to remember is that you do need to run that line of glue down there, just on the edge there, because that is your stability. If I didn't have that glue line in place, as soon as I put tension on here, the whole thing would simply push off the ends of the warp, and you don't want that to happen. And the third thing is that you need to make sure that the space between your 2 sticks is uniform all the way along, because if there's a discrepancy, then you will have a discrepancy in the tension of your warp. So I hope this helps. This is a technique that I use on my big floor looms over and over and over again. Don't often use it on a table loom, but since I had to do it, I thought that this was a really good opportunity to share it with you, so I hope it helped.